One of the things I wanted to ask you to start this is if you could describe your work, what kinds of words would describe what you do?
It would be abstract expressionism in the form of painting and sculpture.
Karl, would you take us through the process of making a piece of art? What is your process?
Well, I start right in. When it's painting, I just take the canvas, I take the paint, and I start with a couple of brush strokes on the canvas. And I guess what I'm thinking about is coming out of my fingers and out of the brush. Sometimes it turns out all right, and when it doesn't, I just put it away and look at it with what I call a third eye in 2 weeks. Mm-hmm. But I won't throw it away. I'll still develop it because it's a process in itself. But what I find that makes me happy is when I do a painting and finish it in an hour, and to me it looks like something.
When you say it looks like something, you mean?
It looks good.
It looks good.
It looks good.
How do you know when it's good? That's a question lots
well,
of people ask
to me, a good-looking painting is one that is properly designed and the colors are right. They don't clash. And I never thought that a painting should develop on about color alone. To me, design and composition is the important thing. And one of my great artists who I have admired for years only worked in black and white. Mm. And although my latest paintings, which are here, are in color, I still thought of him. He was Franz Klein, who was an abstract expressionist, and not as famous as Willem de Kooning, who was much more famous, but Klein always said something to me in just a few strokes of black on white. This group of black and white paintings were inspired in a way by Oriental calligraphy, which I always admired, also African sculpture, and these are 4 in a group of 10 that were commissioned by a restaurant here in Gainesville featuring Singapore cuisine. They were very loosely done, as you can see, and they have a great deal of action in them. I think black on white is always very striking and makes a statement. If you look closely, you can see several figures in each painting, which is my thing. I consider myself a figurative artist, and whatever I do indicates the figure in some kind of action. When I just want to please myself, I work in black and white, which is what I started with when I was 15, and I just did drawings in pen on paper. At the time, they were influenced by Picasso's Cubism, which was a challenge to me, very, very difficult to understand, but I was completely transfixed at looking at his work, and it influenced me in that my drawings, figure drawings, had triangular features in them. I remember it may be silly, but when I was 17, I did a whole series of drawings of people with triangular heads, and some of them sold. I mean, people may have thought, well, you know, this is original. I was showing in the Washington Square outdoor art exhibit, and a lot of these drawings with features that were inspired by Picasso sold. Also, another thing comes to mind as far as Picasso, when there was an exhibit of his very early work at the Metropolitan Museum. I ran up the stairs to see it, and they had little drawings on scratch pads. And I thought, gee, he thought of that. I thought of that too. It's wonderful. You know, it's just wonderful. And I was so excited that I ran up this whole flight of stairs. I got there the minute the museum opened. I didn't want anybody to be in my way, and I just ate the whole thing up.
Who some of your inspirations were in terms of fellow artists, and you said Picasso and Klein
and Alexander Calder, who was famous for his mobiles, which I never did. I never did mobiles, but I was happy to learn after I had done some small wire sculptures that a very talented and famous artist like Calder also did wire sculptures when he was fairly young. I thought, gee, great, I'm not the only one, and he's brilliant.
You were telling about when you were 17, you were selling.
Yeah.
Is that how you began? You went to shows and you made yourself a living by doing this? You went to art school, I think?
I went to 3 acclaimed art schools, actually, one of which didn't charge tuition. You had to pass a test. And I was in such a hurry. I got out of each one exactly what I wanted, and then I said, they're wasting my time, they're wasting my time. Especially since my work was selling, I thought, you know, why should I wait to get a degree and start selling my work when I'm selling it now?
Yeah.
So that's, and I was never sorry about that.
Yeah. When you say you went to school and you got what you wanted, is there any way to explain what it was that you got?
Well, I learned about design and composition,
okay,
which to me is still very important. You have to know how to balance a painting, a drawing, or whatever.
Do you want to just point to one here and talk about it?
See, actually, this has only 2 colors, and it's 1 color, because I don't believe that black is considered a color. It's considered an absence of color. So, and then texture is important also. You see how I got with dry brush and wet brush until I got what I wanted.
And this is dry brush right through here?
Yeah. And whether I wanted it or not, since I always think of the figure, and especially dance, I was always a dance enthusiast. Even when I don't want to depict a figure, I somehow see them. This to me looks like a figure.
Yes,
yeah, and this looks like a
too,
figure.
yeah.
Yeah, so that's automatic. It's just from my experience.
So tell us about these 2 with the metal work.
Yeah, well, I call them constructions. I'm not the first one who called his artwork a construction, but it is, to me, collage in metal. I just got the idea from seeing collages, and parts of it is steel and parts of it is aluminum, and I cut out part of the canvas, which really shows up on a colored background. This is a white background, so I don't know if you can see that the canvas is cut out, but just as a point of interest, I cut out the canvas, and this is a female form, and these I just had fun with, you know. I felt that this balances the thing, and this is the focal point, you know, just do something in red.
Sure.
This stuff is metal mesh, which I got in a hardware store. A lot of my equipment I get in hardware stores. A lot of the steel, the copper, and so on. This is some kind of a tree, actually. I meant to put a tree there. And whether it looks like a tree or not, I don't know.
looks
To,
like a
to me,
dancing
it
tree.
looks like a tree. I did about 5 of them. I think they're about a year and a half old. The most recent things are the paintings, actually.
Karl, you were telling us about your wire sculptures, your early wire
Yes,
sculptures.
yes.
We have one here.
Yes, this is a fairly early one. Several of the stores were interested in that technique. It actually developed from my having done so many line drawings in pen and ink. I decided that I wanted to give my drawings dimension, and the way to do it was to use wire. Instead of just the line, you've got wire. A lot of the stores were interested, including Lord and Taylor and Bonwit Teller, which closed, unfortunately. It was a great store.
Tell us about Only One Eye.
The One Eye was to attract attention to the merchandise because it was my idea. They sometimes would wrap a scarf around the thing. I would hate it if they put a hat on it because
The hair is beautiful.
So anyway, the One Eye would attract attention. The potential customer would say, "What's going on there? She's got one eye." And then they would say, "Oh, what a beautiful scarf. You know, I've got to get that scarf." And that was the idea.
And how about this sculpture?
That one is about 15 years old. And as a result of that, I got one of the biggest commissions I ever had from Saks Fifth Avenue, which had me do 100 angels from about 14 inches to 4 feet tall in that technique.
Karl, tell us about these two, would you?
Yeah, well, in my development, I decided to add pieces of metal to give a more solid look. Of course, it's direct metal sculpture, which is different from most conventional sculpture. This one is about 2 years old, this angel. And I like the gold on it, which is not brass, it's aluminum. I was lucky to get a roll of aluminum that was silver on one side and gold on the other. So I used the gold to accent that piece. This kind of thing, which was inspired by archaic Greco-Roman sculpture, you know, a la the Venus de Milo, you know, or the Nike of Samothrace, you know, Winged Victory, which I always thought were wonderful, very beautiful, and I saw that kind of thing when I was probably about 3 years old for the first time.
I know that your dad was a huge influence in your life of introducing you to creativity.
Oh, yeah. Well, my father was a dentist, and he had talent. He especially had a wonderful picture of Abraham Lincoln that he did in pencil. That was very beautiful. Unfortunately, it was ruined in a fire. But when I was 3 and 4 years old, I remember that he entertained me by making little animal figures out of dental wax. And that kept me very happy, you know, watching his hands work. And he also introduced me to opera and ballet. He took me to the opera when I was 4 years old. I think it was Hansel and Gretel. And the witch scared me to death. But
And ballet, he took you to early ballets.
yes, and he took us to the museums. I remember he took me to the Metropolitan Museum when I was very young, and at that time there was a cast of the Winged Victory at the head of the stairs. The original is in the Louvre. The Met had an exact replica. And when she has no head, you know.
Mm-hmm.
And when I saw it, I said, Daddy, Daddy, the lady has no head. What happened to her head? I remember that. And
Do you remember his answer?
he didn't know what to say. He said, well, it's very old. The head fell off, something like that.
So you learned the access to all of this beauty when you were a very, very young kid.
Yeah. When I was 5 or 6, he took me to see a Wagnerian opera. I was off opera for the next 20 years.
Was it The Ring?
It was one of the Ring operas, Die Valkyrie. Yeah.
Oh, okay.
And it was much too heavy for me, but I began to appreciate it so when I was about 25 that he became one of my favorite composers, along with Richard Strauss, another German.
Tell me what the sacrifices were that you had to make in order to be an artist your whole life.
It wasn't always that much of a living, actually. I mean, I just got by. But the important thing was that I had my way, and I was very, very happy with everything I did. So many people work for their 2-week vacation, and they hate the rest of the year.
Yeah.
Whereas I was happy every day of the year, and I didn't care if I didn't go anywhere. You know, I was happy in my own little studio, working, and I got quite a reputation from doing this work for the stores. Somebody called me legendary. You know, that was fun to hear. And
Well, you've been written up in some of the major art magazines.
when I was 21, there's a publication, Women's Wear Daily, in New York, that's still going strong, and they used to write up the window. So I got some write-ups in Women's Wear Daily, and I got write-ups in Interior Design magazine, and one that has to do with holidays. I forgot what it was called. So I got rid of them, you know, because I thought, it's what you're doing now that's important. You know, it's not what you did 50 years ago. I thought, forget it, and I got rid of them.
So what's your secret for being creative still today?
It's a tough question. You know, if you're creative, you're creative, no matter how old you are. Degas took up photography when he was about 75, I think. You know, he felt probably that he couldn't paint anymore, so he took up photography and did a fabulous job. There's no secret, you know, you just do it. You just do it.
Well, your advice to people your age who are here at OK?
If you really want to do it, you know, you can do artwork, because you have to get it out of your head that it doesn't have to be something that's going to hang in a museum. Just do it and relax, you know. Not everybody, a lot of people say, I want to be an artist, you know. It's not that easy, but everybody can do some kind of art or craft, but they have to want to do it. That's the whole thing. You can't be taught to be an artist. You have to want to do it. And I used to get scratch pads and sit on the steps of the house we lived in and scribble, you know, when I was 4 and 5.
And now you go to Starbucks and you...
Now I go to Starbucks and scribble. It's Arrested Development. Yeah. But the important thing was that I had my way, and I was very, very happy with everything I did.